Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and it's time for another of my stories. Now, I've been revealing my life story over the last few months, and we've got to the point where I've been married and we're living in the house that I'm currently in at the moment. 30 years ago, moved in, and I've had a son at this point with my wife Dawn. And everything's going well. I'm earning my living doing a little bit of juggling and unicycling and mime, robotics and all those sort of circusy skill things on the corporate circuit. But I'm also still doing the extra work, working on TV programs like The Bill, Lovejoy, excuse me, and various other programs like that. And in between all of that, I suppose I've still got this hankering to make my own videos or films and perform. So although I'm in the performance business, there's still something in me that's not quite satisfied. When I left school, you may remember my so-called careers teacher had said, "What do you want to do, Richard, when you leave school?" And when I was 15, I said I wanted to be an actor or I wanted to be a film director. And of course they had no opportunity back then in the late 70s to do that. But I still wanted to do that. And so I thought, well, I can't just walk into that. I'll probably have to do this as a hobby. So I joined the local cine and video group, which was in Worthing, where we are. And that was quite interesting. There was a lot of people with different sort of gear. There were some people who was just still using Super 8 gear, which I thought was a bit daft. And then there were people who were using video stuff. And I bought a VHS, full-size VHS camera, which, if I remember rightly, was about £1,000. It was a huge amount of money to spend. And the reason I did that was more to film my son Stanley as a baby. And I'd had this and we were filming and documenting as you do. I mean, these days people do it on their phones, of course, and the quality is, infinitely better. But back then it was VHS, and when I went off to work, Dawn would also film the kids on this bulky camera. Anyway, I got into the group with the cine and the video group, and we met. I can't remember. I think it was on a Monday evening, if I remember rightly. And we met regularly, and I got involved with the committee in the end, and I took over the job of the newsletter. Oh my God, never again. We produced this newsletter. I think it was called Freeze Frame. And because I'd had some experience in printing, and then I think I had an Amiga 1040 ST computer and a dot matrix printer, I got involved in doing the original artwork for the magazine, the newsletter. So I think it was originally just an A4 thing, and I got it into a little booklet thing. I said, oh, wouldn't it be great? And we put pictures in and all of that. And it was always difficult, like all these times, if anybody's been on a committee and tried to do newsletters, to get people to write something or send pictures in or anything to fill up this wretched thing once a month, so that you had this vague sense of communication between you and the rest of the group. Anyway, so I did that for a bit, and I knew everybody and they all knew me. And I was really the youngest one there, and I was in my early 30s really. The rest of them were pretty much older people and retired. And I remember most of them were making videos of their holidays, and they had the latest gear. They'd spend a fortune on their video stuff, and then they would show their videos, and they would be 20 minutes of, I don't know, somewhere in the Algarve or Lanzarote or something, and all this sort of snaking camera work and no sense of story and nothing like that. And I was getting very frustrated and very bored. But I did get to chatting with the two chaps who were very much into Super 8, and it reignited my love for film again. The reason I sort of lost interest with Super 8 is to do audio was a real headache, because Super 8 you could only put this tiny little bit of stripe, they called it, down the side of the film, and it never really sounded very good. And I was into audio, and I liked the quality of audio, because to me audio really makes a video work. If the audio is rubbish, the video can look naff. Even if the video is a bit naff but the audio is good, it saves the overall thing. It's a strange thing. Anyway, so I'd sort of fallen out of love with film, because the film I would like to have worked on was 16mm and doing it with professional gear, but that wasn't an option. Anyway, they convinced me to have a go and get back into Super 8, which I did. And I wanted to do stories. I wanted to make something that, like you would see on the television. So I had this idea for a character called Arnold. And I'd had this idea many years ago when I was, I suppose, about 18, maybe a bit younger, for this, well, it was a feature film idea that I had, and I'd written some of the script and various things. He was a sort of cross, if you like, between a Jacques Tati, a Norman Wisdom, an Eric Sykes and Laurel and Hardy. And he was a sort of character in there, a sort of hapless character in which things would happen to him in a slapstick fashion, but not over the top, not too much clowning, but also, like in some of Jacques Tati's stuff, it was what was going on in the background was equally fascinating. So I had, back in the day when I first moved down to Worthing, we had parking meters. And so I had this concept that whatever, you know, this character Arnold would have the main plot, and that would go on. But in the background, these comedy things would be going on. So, for example, you might see him down on the seafront, and someone had parked their car and was trying to feed the meter. But the meter was on, where they used to be on a sort of steel pole, this would be a rubber pole. And so, you know, you could bend this thing and put your money in, and it would whip up like this and send money out again, flying like this. So you would just see people in the background, you know, these things would whip like this, and the money would fly off, and they'd be running off to go and scrabble about in the background. Whilst in the foreground, you've got the main story going on. Anyway, there were loads of gags like that, and I haven't got time to tell you them all. So it was a sort of very visual thing, and I had this idea. But of course, that's far too grand to do on Super 8 with a bunch of old retirees and on no money. So I did this slightly surreal thing about this chap Arnold, who had to deliver some earplugs to a guy who made hammers. So I turned my upstairs master bedroom, which I now have my new Vobes show studio in, into a little film studio, and it was the earplug testing station. And Arnold is there with these earplugs in, blowing horns and honking horns and blowing trumpets and things like that to just double check. And at one point, he gets one and he goes, "Oh yeah, no, this one's okay," and he sets off some dynamite. Which blows up the whole place, and goes, "Yeah, these are great." So it's all sort of very silly, really. And he's got to deliver it to a chap who is testing hammers. And he needs to know that these hammers at the Hammerhead testing station, and he's got one of these, you know, those fairground things where you throw the hammer down and it goes up and rings a bell. And of course, he's testing these hammers to make sure that they're integral before they can be sold. And he's got one of these things that rings the bell. And so he's testing them. And every time it's a good one, it rings the bell. Well, he's being deafened by the bell, you see. So he wants the earplugs. And my Arnold character needs to deliver them. So the story is really about the delivering of the earplugs. And it's just got this very surreal beginning and this very surreal end, if you like. And so part of this sequence is about I'm taking this box, I've wrapped them up and I put them into this parcel of earplugs that I'm trying to deliver. And there's a sequence in which there's a sequence where I keep going and getting lost, but never mind all that. There's just this one sequence where I'm walking with this parcel down a high street, and as I'm approaching, a car arrives in front of an electrical shop, as it happened, because the guy who owned the electrical shop was also a member of the cine club. So I was using all the cine club people. This car pulls up, and these three burglars come out for a heist, and they rush in to the electrical shop. And because these are all old retired people I was using from the cine club, and they've got these stockings over their heads. So they're old retired people. They're not young muscular blokes. They're old retired people who are going at sort of retired people's pace, leaping out of this car, waddling into the shop. They've got this guy at gunpoint, and then they do this sort of chain gang thing where one hands something from the shop to one guy on the pavement, who hands it to another guy by the open car on the roadside, and you've got these various items being passed down this chain into the car as they rob this place in broad daylight. And now I'm walking down the road towards them, and as I go through this chain, one of them, the guy on the pavement, they're in auto mode now, and so he takes the parcel from me, gives it to the guy who puts it in the car. And I sort of don't know, because as that's taken from me, the guy in the shop has come out with something else and hands it to me, thinking I'm the guy on the pavement who's part of the gang and in the chain. And then I carry on, and I actually find that I've got this money box, but I don't notice. The audience see this, and so this kind of goes as smoothly as you can with none of them noticing. And then eventually one of them's putting this parcel that's got earplugs written all over it, going, wait a minute, we don't need this. Turns round, and the rest of the group, with their old stockings over their faces, peer out, and they see me disappearing down the road with their money box, which has been, the prize of the heist, as it were. So they all bundle back into the car and start to give chase. Well, I've given them the slip for a while, because I've turned down a side road and they can't get the car in, and there's all this sort of other business that goes on, and they've almost given up. And I come back, there's this other sequence in which I keep coming to this crossroads. And every time I come to the crossroads, I come down this one street and I go, I don't know which way I'm supposed to go. Maybe it's left. And I go left, but I come back down the original street again. I go, well, wait a minute, I'm here again. Oh, maybe it's straight on, and I head off straight on. And yes, you've guessed it, I come back down that original street. And it's on that time I'm coming back going, oh, well, it has to be right then, doesn't it? And as I'm about to go right, the car with the thieves turn up, and they've lost me, and they've kind of given up, and they're all getting out going, oh, well, it's your fault, you should have done this and you should have done that, it's all your fault. Then they see me. And so we're filming in an area just down the road from my house, where there's a little tunnel underneath the railway bridge, and it's a nice little quiet area, and it's kind of got a crossroads. One of the crossroads is actually this tunnel underneath the railway bridge, but anyway, so there's sort of this very quiet area, and I chose that would be a nice little location. And so they see me, and then there's this sort of bit where they rough me up a bit. Well, we're filming all this, and it's taking a bit of time, and these old boys, you're sort of in their 60s and 70s, with stockings tied up in a knot over the top, over their faces like this. We're filming, and we're doing it we're doing it in different out of sequence bits, and I've got a storyboard, so I know exactly what has got to fit to here and fit to there, and we're filming this and filming that. And all of a sudden, a police car turns up with the lights flashing, not the sirens, but the lights are flashing, headlights are on. These two guys come dashing out of the car. A bit like when I was on Campion, really. They suddenly come from nowhere, and they leap out, and they look, and they very quickly clocked that there are these old boys, stockings on their head, little tripod with this tiny little Super 8 camera, and a chap behind it filming, and then there's me, and I had a flat cap on, I think, and a box which is this sort of fake money box, and they look and they realized what's going on, and they come over and they say, oh, we had a call. Somebody in one of the windows in the houses had peered out and thought there was a burglary going on in real life, even though we'd been there ages and we'd been moving our little camera and tripod around and filming this bit and then moving over there. But, you know, they said, oh yes, it was an elderly lady who looked out and was somewhat scared because there were men with stockings on, looking like they were duffing up a young bloke. Well, of course, we all had a good laugh at this, as you can imagine. But the police did say, he said, oh, you know, if you're doing this sort of thing, whilst ordinarily it wouldn't overly matter, but if you've got people wearing stockings that people might think is something a bit unusual, it's best to tell us. And I did say, I said, well, actually, it's funny because there is a convention with filming that if you're doing filming in the streets, especially story stuff, and you're on a tripod and you're doing anything for any length of time or what have you, that you should let the police know. And I'd written them. I'd had no confirmation to say it was okay. I just advised them we're going to be filming, and I'd given them a vague scenario. And they said, oh, well, we obviously didn't get that. Our commander in the control room just said there was a heist going on or whatever, and they had come hurtling in. So it was a hilarious moment, and unfortunately, the film we edited the film up and all the rest of it, and I got some music composed by a friend of mine. And but again, I had this real problem with the audio, getting the audio on. So the idea then was to have it transferred onto video and put the audio on afterwards so people could see it blown up. But it got to that point where although it was all ready to do that, for some reason, I can't remember why, it never got that final finish, if you like, which was a shame. I got a bit disillusioned again with the whole filming process, and it was some time before I then started to get back into video. And I only really got back into video when video became digital, because up until then there was all this business about generation loss. You'd have your master stuff filmed on one tape, and then you'd have to have two other machines if you're working with video, at least two machines. One machine was sort of mastering everything, and then the other two machines you would edit, you would be playing. It's a complicated process to explain, but they would basically, you would have to keep finding the bits that you were editing to, and then eventually you end up with a master, and then if you wanted to have copies of that, it would be another copy of it. And each copy was what they had said was a generation loss, and it just got more blurrier and blurrier, and it wasn't brilliant to begin with. So that I just sort of got lost. It was all becoming very involved and expensive, and it wasn't really until it became digital, and then it was like going back to Super 8 filming or film filming with trim bins and editing, and you had no generation loss at all, and it was fantastic. And then in another one of these, I'll tell you, as I started to think about making, and I started to make a pilot for a children's television series, but that's in 1993. Prior to that, I did get hold of a a 16mm camera, got a group together, and we made a ghost film that was set modern day with a ghost from the Second World War. But I shall save that story for another of my story episodes. But yeah, that was a hilarious time. Dawn and little Stanley made a cameo part in it. And at some point, I've still got the video, I still got the roll of film, and at some point I need to just try and get that transferred onto digital so I can put the sound tracker on and actually finish that project. It would be fantastic. So there you go. Even though I was entertaining, juggling, unicycling, fire eating and doing all these corporate stuff, which to be honest was just not satisfying me, but it was paying the mortgage, fortunately, I started to get back into the filmmaking and the acting that I really loved. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. I hope it's been interesting. And as soon as I can find, you know, I can't show you any clips, I haven't got any photographs, but at some point I will put a video together where I've dug out all the pictures and talk about all those things and share it with you. So for the moment, it's all words, but I hope it's enjoyable. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you out and about or on another My Story. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.